everybody to this event. It's how do I take this away? We did the same event last year, and this is in collaboration with SLU and Hólar at the Agricultural University of Iceland. And this is just a quick 90-minute meeting where we're gonna try to introduce you to the mission soils. And this is led by the Nation project. It's a EU-funded project. And we have two people from SLU who are in the coordination team of nations. It's Jóhannes and Elín. And Jóhannes is going to introduce us to the EU soil mission, tell us what it is and what opportunities lie there. And then we have Anna Guðrún from Hólum. She's going to talk about grasslands and grazing to conserve and increase soil organic carbon stocks and improve soil structure to enhance soil biodiversity. And Kristján Klöps from Hólar, a student of Anna Guðrún, he's going to give us first insight from the X-Graze project. How does long-term grazing exclusion affect soil organic carbon in Icelandic grasslands? And then we have María Svavarsdóttir from Agricultural University of Iceland. She's going to talk about the soil lab they have there and the infrastructure related to the soil lab. And then we have Jóhannes taking again a little bit more in depth, some focus on some topicals from last year that will be very similar this year. And we know that the topicals are going to open in about 2.5 weeks, so you can see them on the funding and tender portal then. And then I will talk a little bit about the services, and we will finish with the services also provided by nations. So I'm going to give the floor to Jóhannes.
Well, sorry, I'm trying to find my presentation here among all the different flaps. Let's see. Make it like that. This is the same presentation as you showed, Kola, but you just have to be able to shift. Let's see now. Zoom, here we are. Sorry about this. There we go. Here's the presentation. And presentation mode like this. Good. Do you see my presentation now, Kola? Do you see it in presenter mode, or is it it works good?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Good. Well, welcome here to the National Engagement event again. My name is, as Kola said, Jóhannes, and I will start just by saying also that when you applied to this or registered to this event, you also agreed for us to share the participant list, which will be great if you want to collaborate to create living labs in the end. We will also record this Zoom meeting, so people who couldn't join today will be able to see it. And also there might be photos and so on, maybe not from this event, but if you see that you're in somewhere where you don't want to be, let us know, and then we can take you away from pictures and so on. And also you will get info from the Nations project via this email list. And if you want to unregister from that, it's just easy to do that as well. But the first step is to talk about the EU soil mission. So what is it about and what is it? So the EU has launched a mission called A Soil Deal for Europe, which is there to provide a gradual creation of 100 living labs and lighthouses in Europe to lead the transition towards healthy soils. And we will get into living labs and the lighthouses and their definitions a bit later after the Icelandic presentations. But first off, we have to dive into why soils are important in a sense. So life on Earth depends on healthy soils. It's the basis of 95% of our food. Also not to forget the timber that we harvest, for example. Soils are also a major reservoir for carbon, which helps us slow the onset of climate change and also makes us more resilient to extreme climatic events. And soil health is thus essential for the life-sustaining processes on Earth. And in light of this, the Soil Mission has defined healthy soils as soils having the continued capacity to support ecosystem services. So that's what defines a healthy soil. They can have the continued capacity to produce these ecosystem services. However, often soil is taken for granted, yet soil is a fragile and non-renewable resource. So we have to take care of this for and keep them safe for future generations. And soil health is threatened globally, mostly due to human activities, including like our management methods and so on. So it's different land use types, but also intense land use and production and our consummation patterns and so on. Urbanization, but also includes anthropogenic climate change, for example. And a reason why there's problems with soils is that it's a lack of understanding and education related to sustainable management of soil. And in Europe alone, they've estimated that 2/3 of the European soils, both in agriculture and natural and rural areas, are considered unhealthy. And the processes of soil degradation can lead to a collapse of both landscapes and ecosystems, and making societies more vulnerable for extreme weather events. It affects our food security and contamination, and also it may lead to collapse of our political stability as well. And the cost associated to degradation of soils is estimated to be above 50 billion euros per year. So it's a lot of problems that can be solved in that sense. But namely, the main objective of these 100 living labs, or the Soil Deal of Europe, is to create these living labs that should work, should lead the transition towards healthy soils in a rural and urban areas. So the living labs in itself is places on ground where we do on-ground experiments, and lighthouses are sites for showcasing good practices in relation to soil health. And if we go further on, this soil mission is one of EU's 5 missions, so it's really at the top of the importance of a lot of the policy that they're doing. And the mission is also in the heart of the EU Green Deal as well, that is a transition to overcome threats for climate change and environmental degradation. Yes. And the living labs and lighthouses are conducted to soil health, or contribute to soil health specifically. The soil mission includes 8 specific soil health objectives. The first one is to reduce desertification. The second one is to increase soil organic carbon stocks. The second one is to stop sealing and increasing the reuse of urban soils. The fourth one is to reduce soil pollution and enhance restoration. The fifth one is to prevent erosion. Number 6 is to improve soil structure and enhance soil biodiversity. The 7th one is about the EU global footprints on soil. And number 8 is to improve the soil literacy in society. While the mission includes all these 8 objectives, the living labs within the mission do not need to focus on all of them. So depending on the place you are, today we're in Iceland, for example, some of these might be more relevant than others. And important for your future is to set these objectives in the relevance to your local situation. So which objective relates to a problem related to soil in your specific country. Yes. And the soil mission goals and implementation is through these living labs. And as I said, the aim is to have 100 living labs, and they should be spread across different land uses. So it's agricultural, it's forestry, industrial, and urban sites. And they are there to give visibility for soil as a crucial and widely yet unrecognized societal asset and a public good. And they should be pioneers in showcasing and accelerating the transition towards healthy soils and more sustainable practices related to soils. And how they do this is by a bottom-up approach. So you get all kinds of stakeholders involved. It's based on the science and it's interactive to get these innovations to try to solve these soil health challenges that you have. And this is by having a strong stakeholder and citizen engagement. So a big part of the mission is also a co-implementation of the mission. So it should be the same among researchers, land managers, regions, businesses, and policymakers. citizens and also including international partners into this. And this is done to accelerate the co-creation and uptake of solutions. And the soil mission is divided into 4 building blocks. It's the research and innovation program. It's the living labs. That's in 1 block in itself. It's the soil monitoring program and the soil literacy. So the research program is to acquire knowledge and data related to soils and so on. So quite science-based. And then we have the living labs. That is a comprehensive network of these real life sites where you have co-creation and testing and demonstration of these in relation to soil health. And then within EU, they want to harmonize their soil health monitoring and reporting. And this is the soil monitoring part. And then we have communication and training and advice to targeted to like managers and soil advisors and so on, which is the last block. And the living labs is really central to all of these building blocks, both the knowledge and innovation from these real life settings will be implemented in this research and innovation program, or build up scientific knowledge and so on. It also relates to the monitoring part where this monitoring framework can be set up, and it can also be tested within the living labs and lighthouses. And as well, as I said, the big part of these living labs is to bring stakeholders together to learn to set the importance of soil. So the soil literacy and communication and engagement is really a center to the living lab. So they're really a central part to this living lab concept. And with that, I think I will end, and then we go back to these 8 soil mission objectives in an Icelandic context, and then later we go into the definitions of what a living lab is and also what the lighthouse is. Good. And I will stop sharing my screen, and if you don't have, I could take a few questions here. I see if we look at the schedule, right? If anyone has a question, I can answer it now. Otherwise, you can write in the chat, and I will try to answer it later. I think that the picture of what the living lab is and so on will be clearer after we've had the Icelandic context. Okay. Good. Anna Gudrun, is it your turn now? I think. And I will mute.
Okay, thank you. I'll just share my screen here and see here. Yes, I am going to talk about my main thing, grassland and grazing, because so happens Iceland is mostly grassland. It's very much of a grassland, and we've been grazing it for the last 1,000 years. And I think in this relation, it's good to look at what we have in Icelandic grasslands. This is a part of, I'm going to present more or less a result of an older project that we had a few years ago that is relating up to the X-grace that Christian is going to be presenting in the following. So if we have like, take the soil mission objectives, then we have, or I'm taking into the box of the conserve and increase soil organic carbon stocks with this talk, and improve soil structure to enhance soil biodiversity. So these are the 2 objectives that this project that we are talking about, and our aim is taking into these boxes. The grazing on the grasslands, there's not been so much talked about grazing on grasslands in the past, but it's hugely increasing in relation to many sort of different aspects. And just to mention, like regenerative agriculture, of it, that is a core of these 2 concepts that are coming really into nature conservation in Europe, is grazing. Grazing is the core concept of both rewilding and the regenerative agriculture. And if you think about it have the continued capacity to serve ecosystem services, then grazing, using the grassland for grazing, is taking into climate regulation, and that is what we are going to talk about with the carbon sequestration in the following. Now, grazing is providing food and fiber. That's obvious. And carbon sequestration is very high in grasslands, like we are going to be showing. and its nutrient cycling and cultural heritage, not at least. We have this part of the cultural heritage, which is really important in Iceland, which is the background of really our use of the land for the last 1,000 years. So healthy soils, what is this grazing doing in the grasslands in Iceland? Now, grassland have not been sort of the focus often in climate regulation in the past, but it's coming really strongly. There is a reason for that. The 34% of the terrestrial soil carbon stocks are found in grasslands. They're not found in forests. The soils, the main soils that are keeping the carbon, terrestrial carbon, are the grasslands. And there's a reason for it. The natural grasslands, and I'm not talking about cultivated grasslands, I'm not talking about fertilized pastures. I'm talking about natural and semi-natural grasslands, and semi-natural grasslands are the ones that are more or less grazed by livestock, but are not fertilized. And that is what we have in Iceland. These semi-natural grasslands were really abundant in Europe in the past, but they have really disappeared and they are threatened. And in most, like in Scandinavia, semi-natural grasslands are the ones that are most threatened, along with the old forests that have disappeared in the afforestation. And the plants that are threatened are red listed in Scandinavia and Northern Europe are mostly plants from the semi-natural grasslands. So the semi-natural grasslands, they are dominated by grasses and vegetation that is low perennial plants. And these have a huge root system. Perennial plants have much more root systems than annual plants that are used in cultivation. And they allocate a lot of the carbon that they absorb to these below ground organs. So in perennial grasslands, most of the carbon is placed down into the soil. 67% of the carbon goes to the roots in perennial grasslands and with perennial plants, and it's only about 30 to 30% in the annual crops. So you have this huge root system. It was ignored in the past because people just didn't have the ability or the technology to realize how much below ground there was of the organic matter. And now when you're realizing that how enormous these root systems are, they have, like grasses, have up to 80% of the root mass down below. We can see it sometimes in these roabar, where you see all the fibrous root systems coming to the open. And it's also like grasses have very fibrous, thin roots, which have an enormous amount of volume. And the part of our X-Graze project now has been to take samples of these root systems with grazing and without grazing. So it's enormous. These systems here, these grasses here, are now from America. They are enormous root systems. So this is from the the annual crops, and this is from the perennial grasslands. Now I did just by a couple of years ago, I just was in Hólar and I just went out to check, and I just went down to the horse pastures and I picked some grasses there and took the roots. And then I went up to the forestry above and picked the same plants with the roots. I dug them up. And it's an enormous difference. And that's exactly why we went to and check the root systems in the X-Graze project, because it's an enormous difference. Up with the forestry, they were very little root system, but it's really strong root system. And this was taken with a very high pressure grazing in Hólar, down by the low where all the horses are. So it's often we are just like when you're talking about carbon sequestration, we are looking above ground, and we see how the trees are just placing the carbon. They're growing, and the carbon is all above ground. But in the grasslands, it's going below ground, and we have to take that is what is showing up. It's not showing so much up. So in grassland, it's below ground, the grasses, and that's why we have to go and check the soil and see how much of the soil, the carbon content of the soil. Because this here, most of the forest, in the forest, the carbon is above ground, but it's below ground in the grasslands. And the grassland soil is thick, very homogeneous, while you have the forest soil, which is very layered and it's most of the carbon is in the top layers. So if you go and you're just testing the 30 centimeters, it's often missing, especially in old grasslands, you're missing the soil that is below ground, the carbon in the soil in the lower parts of this profile. You know, grazing is also has a lot of effect on plant diversity. And it's very, you know, this is very known, it's a very old knowledge that it's like this normal curve, that with the frequency of disturbance, if you have a little disturbance, then you have some dominant plants that will be dominating and taking over the sward. And that is often the trees. If you have like shrubs, if you have no disturbance, then the trees will come in. But then if you have disturbance like grazing or fire, then they will just be taken, these dominants are taken away, and you can have more smaller plants coming in. But of course, if the disturbance or the grazing is very intensive, then some of them, they're not going to tolerate that. So it's this intermediate grazing that is usually giving the most diversity. And we did not check it so thoroughly in this project I'm just going to be presenting now, but we have been doing this in the grazing, you know, the X-graze. We have taken the above ground biodiversity of the plant diversity. And I just put this up like sort of some of the, you know, the number of plants that we have been registering. And we did this in two ways, both, you know, with frequency frames and then also counting in a certain circle. And it's quite enormous. The difference in these forestry enclosures that we have been using with the grazed one is about twice usually, depending on the age of the enclosures, but the biodiversity is much higher in the pastures that are grazed than the ones that are not grazed or have been protected from grazing for several decades. And the grazing is also then in the following, increasing this soil carbon accumulation, because grazing, you can just think about golf courses, you know, where they're cutting the grass all the time. It's really dense. It's so dense that it's very difficult to get a spade down into it. And it increases tillering. The grasses are just, you know, that's the response of the grazing and many of the forests, that if it's cut, then it starts giving more branches. That's why you go out with your, you know, with your cuts, you know, you're cutting your shrubs in your garden. You want it to be more dense, and then you cut it. The same goes with the grasses. And it triggers short-lived root mass. The root mass is getting more active with grazing, and it's more increased root input. It's more like dead roots that are coming into the soil and giving the carbon, and lignin is increasing the roots, and that gives the root a more decay resistant and accumulates the carbon accumulates in the soil, increases nutrient cycling, and that is the soil carbon inputs. So it's also been, you know, it's activating the microbes in the soil, and so it's enormous. I'm just putting some of the references, but it's getting to be so much literature on this in the last 20 years, and it's a completely different picture than we had before. So we did this. It's like a pilot study here a few years ago, and we picked out 3 farms in Borgarfjörður in the west of Iceland, and we decided, you know, this was, you know, heavy grazing that was close, you know, there was enclosures that were close to the farm that were used mostly for horses, and where the horses would stay and were grazing really narrow, sort of close to the ground. And then was the light grazing, which were the, you know, the hillsides that the sheep were running around and in the summer. And then there were forest enclosures close by. So we just had a fence between the forest closure and the grazing part. And we did this flux measurement on these. And then we took soil samples, and we took every 10 centimeters down to the soil into 60 centimeters. 60 centimeters, we usually were down to the ice age gravel then. So we also measured the ecosystem exchange, net ecosystem exchange, and we also had NDFE. So these are just some of the pictures that we had. This is like this was heavy grazing, and this was light grazing. This was a forestry enclosure, and then we were this is the enclosure that we had in the back. And this is a picture from the sward taken exactly on this one. It is in Hood, and that is what you had often really a lot of mosses and the thick moss layer. when you had a very dense wood where it was grazed on the other side. And this was heavily grazed. And then you had these, here is the same, heavy grazed and light grazed on the side. So we had this in 3 places, and the result was quite clear. We only had, 3 holes that we are digging for the soil samples, and we were taking down a lot of samples from each hole. But, it was very clear that we say protected here is the exclosure. It was just like it had been going into dormancy. There was nothing happening. It was very little respiration and very little uptake. So in the end, the carbon uptake in the enclosure was very, very low. The intensity grazing was even more than the extensive grazing. So what we had considered to be quite, more grazing, which was the pastures with the horses and often the, sheep, or it was quite a lot. And in the soil, it was the same. In the intensive grazing, we had more carbon in the soil than we had in the extensive one, and it was released in the protected or in the exclosure. So with this in mind, we sort of initiated this project with the Rannies. We went to do the same thing on 40 sites in Iceland. We ended up taking 2 sites away, so I think we have 38. But we did exactly the same thing in 38 sites, and Christian is going to present the results because the picture is exactly the same. So what we are seeing here now is that the gray sites, they showed more negative NEE. There was more absorption of carbon in these sites, and with more grazing, it was more. And with more indicate, it was more carbon dioxide uptake in the gray sites compared to the non-gray sites. So like the forestry enclosures were like they were just sleeping. They were not doing anything. And the total soil organic content was also higher the gray sites. And that's what we're saying. So because this forestry enclosures we knew from the farmers when they were put in, and we did that on purpose to have sites when you collected 40 sites all over Iceland. We collected sites that we knew we could have exactly date on when these enclosures were put up, so we knew how much time had not been grazed. So we could get an estimate on, the sites on the other side were continuously grazed, all of them. So we could sort of figure out, how long time has not been grazing there. And it seems like that without grazing, the soil organic carbon is lost with time. You can either think about it like because it was so much, it was less in the enclosures that had not been grazed. So either you can just say, okay, they were equally, 40, 50 years ago before they put up the fence, that everything was grazed. Then you put up the fence, and either of the two, either it's more accumulating in the soil where it's grazed, that's why it's higher, or it's also been lowered. It's also been sort of, it's been released, the carbon has been released from the enclosure, the forestry enclosure. And that seems to be the case from other studies, that if it's not grazed and the accumulation of the intake of the soil carbon is not sort of compensating for the losses with respiration, then it just decays with time. So in these forestry enclosures, they are sort of releasing the carbon instead of accumulating. It's accumulating in the top, but in the soil below is really releasing carbon. So we are doing this exactly the same thing, repeating it, and we did take more. We did with replications, and Christian is going to present these studies that will come now. But I just want to say this this is a sort of interesting paper. It's one of these interesting papers that have been coming out lately, that global cooling by grassland soils of the geological past or the near future. Because now it's relating this climate change also with thinking about the Pleistocene 10,000 years ago, or during the Ice Age, when you had enormous grasslands created by the huge megafauna, and they created these enormous grasslands and the thick grassland soils that are in Europe, in America, the prairies, and in Africa. And when we are now taking these soils and cultivating them and releasing the carbon again, it's also coming from these big grasslands, are also coming enormous amount of emissions, carbon emissions. So the thing is that we should sort of that all the carbon that's been lost from the grassland soils with agriculture, it will be put down to the soil again with grazing and the grasses and grazing. So thank you so much. Put this up for in the end. So I hope I wasn't too long. Thank you. And Joe and slideshow.
Very interesting. And now to Christian. He was here before.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can share your screen also, Christian. I think if you end your screen sharing, Anna.
Oh, I haven't done that. Okay, stop sharing. Thank you. Yes.
Great. Here he comes. I leave the floor
to unmute myself. Can you see it? Great. So yes, as Anna Grun was already introducing, thank you for the talk. I will focus in my talk on the first highlights from my PhD project, which is part of the research project X-Grade that Anna Grun introduced. It's funded by RANIS and it's led by Anna Grun and has some both collaboration in Iceland with Icelandic universities and also with international universities, as I pick it on the bottom. The work I will present is not yet published and it's also still work in progress since not all of the data are analyzed, so just to bear that in mind. When this project, we aim to generate data to better quantify the carbon balance of Icelandic grasslands, because as you can see in the top left panel, grasslands are the major land cover category in Iceland, and livestock grazing the most important land use. But in recent years, grazing is increasingly abandoned. So we need to better understand what's happening in these grasslands that have been abandoned from grazing. According to the National Carbon Inventory Report, grasslands are the major contribution of Icelandic greenhouse gases, as you can see in the bottom right, bottom left panel. But these data have been gone into the carbon inventory mostly limited to processes occurring above ground, as Anna Guthrun already showed before. The majority of processes and carbon is below ground in grasslands, which is particularly true in northern latitudes, as shown in the bottom right picture, where you can really see the big difference between above ground and below ground carbon stocks. So therefore, we aim to investigate how carbon fluxes between grazing and grassland differ after long-term grazing exclusion, and how grazing and grazing exclusion is interacting with vegetation composition and vegetation structure. And finally, how these are interacting with soil organic carbon and how soil organic carbon is changing with grazing exclusion and all that. To answer these research questions, we selected 37 sites in total all around Iceland that are shown here in the map. They all had like continuous grazing and grazing exclusion for at least 20 years, just divided by a fence with all other environmental factors equal, to really compare the effect of grazing between these sites. We had different grazing intensities in all of the grazing sites and also different grazing species. In all sites, we had an equal sampling design, as shown here on the left-hand picture, with paired plots and 3 replicates per plot. In each replicate, we took soil samples and root samples from like soil profiles, as shown here on the bottom right panel, and had 3 flux measurements per replicate for several days over the growing season, as shown with a chamber method, as shown in the top right panel. We measured sward height differences between the grazed and the ungrazed plot to create a gradient of grazing intensity as shown here in this graph and also in the top panel pictures for low, medium, and high grazing intensity dependent on the difference in sward height between the grazed site and the protected site. All our grasslands were included in the broad grassland category that is used in the Icelandic land use database, which encompasses basically all open habitats that are not wetlands and have at least 20% vegetation cover. So we had like true grasslands, shrubbies, transitional sites that shifted from a grassland to a more moss or shrub dominated site, some forest succession, a wet grassland, and a highland range. And for showing first some results from the above ground vegetation, we can see here on the top left panel and the bottom left panel that both above ground biomass and sward heights are significantly higher in almost all our sites, with like in many cases biomass being twice as high in exposures compared to grazed sites. But in contrast to that, on the top right panel, the below ground biomass from the 0 to 10 centimeters root mass, so the very shallow topsoil roots, were significantly higher in grazed sites compared to the exclosures, which shows a complete opposite from like the above ground biomass. And as I've indicated here with the black arrows, these effects were like particularly strong in grasslands. When we now look into the carbon fluxes, we can see here that in here I show all the carbon fluxes, and like the negative numbers indicating carbon uptake by the vegetation, so it's from an atmospheric point of view, and the positive numbers indicate in carbon emissions, so due to respiration. And the bright bars in the center of the bar charts that are the ratio between carbon uptake and carbon emissions, so the net ecosystem exchange. And we see that basically in all our sites, they are taking up carbon, but with strong differences between grazed and excluded sites, where we have usually more carbon uptake in the grazed sites compared to the exclosures, except for the two forest succession sites and the wet grassland site, where we did not find significant differences. The same is also true when I calculated growing season carbon uptake ratios using the equation that I showed in the top panel here, using gross primary production data for like average light conditions together with respiration and over the growing season. And there we can see that grasslands are in general carbon sinks due to fluxes, but with strong differences in between grazed and excluded sites, with grazed sites usually having higher carbon uptake. And when we look like into the shrubby sites and the traditional sites, so when sites are becoming more shrubby, then the effect is becoming more neutral between uptake and emission, and no net carbon gain have been found. And as we would expect also for the wet grassland sites, since it's a drained peat soil, we have net carbon emission and it's a carbon source. But again, like on the grazed sites, the source activity was much lower compared to the explosion. Where we finally now look into some first data from the soil organic carbon. They are just like a third of all data have been analyzed so far, so it's just a subsample of the total data and very preliminary so far. There we can see here in the top left panel that between grazed and excluded sites, we did not really find significant differences in soil organic carbon, but we can see that in the top 30 centimeters, about 2/3 of all soil organic carbon could be found, and the rest is like in the 30 to 60 centimeter soil depth. As you can see on the bottom left panel, we also did not find significant differences between grassland habitats and shrubby habitats, although we saw like slight higher carbon contents in the grassland sites compared to the shrub heath. but no general differences when we average through all our sites. And also like the nitrogen stocks showed a very similar pattern to what we see here for the carbon stocks, but I did not show them because they were closely correlated with each other. But to look closer into differences, I showed here on the left-hand panel differences in carbon stocks on the site-specific scale. So for each site that has been analyzed, how carbon stocks change between the grazed and the protected site, the excluded site, and the blue colors indicate higher carbon stocks on the grazed sites. The red color indicate higher carbon stocks on the excluded site. And there we can see we have like no clear picture. We have sites where we gain carbon with grazing exclusion, and we have sites where we lose carbon with grazing exclusion. But we have like some differences between the topsoil and the subsoil. So the topsoil in the top left panel, there we have a tendency of higher carbon stocks on the grazed sites, and in the subsoil in the bottom left panel, we have a tendency of higher carbon stocks on the excluded side. And to better understand what might drive these differences in these sites, I plotted here on the top right panel the interaction between carbon stock changes and grazing intensity. And there we very clearly could see differences between the three grazing intensity categories I introduced before. We see like in medium grazed sites, there we have a tendency of higher carbon stocks in the grazed sites, so potentially a carbon gain with grazing. And both in the low and the high grazing category, we see relatively strong carbon or differences with higher carbon stocks in the excluded sites. But just to mention, like the sample size is at the moment quite low, especially for the low and high grazing category, since due to that the data is not completely analyzed yet, and we have to wait until all the data are available if we can confirm this picture and make some conclusive statements. So just to show you how that might look, here on the left-hand panel, I showed the three sites from the high grazing intensity category. They were all heavily grazed by horses, and also all three sites were in a slope position. And you can see it's really down grazed, strong hammocky, some openings in the site. So that might be a land use in grazing intensity that's not really beneficial for carbon sequestration in the grasslands. While on the right-hand side, I have taken three sites that are like in the medium graze category, and all show the carbon gain on the grazed side compared to the excluded sites. And there we see a much more complete vegetation cover and more lush and vegetation, which would be potentially beneficial for carbon sequestration. So just to wrap up, or as I could show based on our data analysis, all carbon fluxes we've measured over the growing season were reduced in the exclosures compared to the grazed sites, which could indicate like a more productive vegetation on the grazed sites compared to the exclosures. And also in the sum over the growing season, that picture was confirmed. And in terms of biomass, we see some contrast pictures. Above ground vegetation, the biomass was higher on the exclosures, while below ground biomass was higher in the grazed sites. And for the soil organic carbon, we did not see a significant difference when we summed them up, but the tendency of topsoil carbon increased with grazing, while subsoil increased with grazing exclusion, and that there are some dependencies on grazing intensity for total carbon. Thank you. That's more presentation. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I think this is a great insight in like, I mean, grazing within Iceland is going to be a huge part of everything that like it's a large part of the land use in Iceland. So for example, a living lab related to grazing and carbon stocks, as you've been talking, I think has a great potential to do so. I think also Iceland can contribute with having a unique landscape compared to, I mean, in relation to EU as a whole. So a great potential there to establish those. Can you try to end your presentation, Christian?
Yes,
Then
I'll
we have-
try. Where do I do that? Here,
and
stop
feel
share.
free to
Yes.
ask the presenters questions in the chat, or we can take it in the open discussion later as well. But now I invite Maria Svavarsdottir to present also. Sorry if I said your last name terribly wrong. Do you have a presentation, Maria, or do you just want?
I sent it to Kolla,
Oh, just det. Kolla.
but I can open it if you want to.
Okay, she gives the not the thumbs up, but the okay.
Can you open it, Maria?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's open. Share screen. So do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Perfect.
You can put the percent. Yes, exactly. Perfect.
Okay, my name is Maria. I'm from the Agricultural University of Iceland. I'm a physical geographer who specialized in soil and soil analysis and soil sampling. And I'm here to introduce the infrastructure that we have in the Agricultural University and tell you about all kinds of equipment and methods and instruments, and also like the human resource we have and experience. Of course, we have a soil scientist and ecologist, and we have, of course, master.
Presentation, it's not þetta ekki sýningamóti, við sjáum ennþá glærunar inn á vinstra megin.
Ok, ég samt sýningamóti á mér.
Þetta verður sem með 2 skjái.
Nei, ég bara með, jú, byrju, ég skal loka.
Við lokumst á hana.
Komið núna.
Komið núna, perfekt. Takk fyrir.
Yeah, okay, so we have like soil experts and ecologists, PhD students, master students, and we also collaborate with other projects like Unigreen. That's like a cooperation with, I think, 5 universities in England. And we are also part of Global, which from the department in the food and agriculture. And we're trying to harmonize soil sampling and soil methods in the world, so we can compare it and make it easier to access.
Can you try to be closer to the mic, Maria? You're
Yes.
disappearing sometimes. Sorry.
So we have like all kinds of instruments and apparatus, and we have like various soil augers that is used for different conditions and different purposes. Of course, we also have like trucks and need to go to different places. And here we see an example of soil augers. And for example, the one can go up to 2 meters down below the soil surface ground. So that can be very handy. For example, using chronology to determine the age of the soil. And also it's very convenient when you have like a very thick layers of soil that we do have in Iceland someday. And working in the field can be harsh and can have a difficult situations, and you have to organize it well and have like experienced persons in it. And we have lots of human resources in the Agricultural University to plan and go to the field for many days. So those who work and analyze soils, they know that the road to analyzing can be very long, and the procedure and the process of working with the soil can be, a great work before you can analyze the soil. It's not like working, for example, with geothermal water, where you can just take a sample from the water and put it into a UV meter, almost undiluted, to, for example, measure the nutrients. So the methods for soil is, yes, work consuming. But we have like a very good conditions to work with the soil. We can dry it, we can sieve it, we can weigh it, we can ball mill it. Some methods where you have to ball mill the soil. We can shake it and we can extract like preparation for various analyses, for example, like cation exchange capacity. And this is just an example of what we can. And also we have got like water retention pressure plate extractor, where we can measure the water holding capacity in different pressure, like 1 bar, 3 bars, 5 bars, and 50 bars. And we use gas for that to create the pressure. So, and also, as I said before, some analyzing demands that you sometimes you have to do analysis with all the samples. So you have a small formula, as you can see up in left. And on the bottom to the left, you can see how the soil turns into the powder. And we also have a big formula that we use for soil. And there's a different capacity on each formula, and it depends on what kind of soil you have in it. But the main purpose for this is to make the soil homogeneous. But the main thing that we analyze here, of course, we prepare the soil for various analyses, and we have to send it to another institution to get it analyzed. But this is our main analyzing that we do here. We do pH in water, in potassium chloride, in natrium fluoride. We do organic matter by doing loss of magnesium, and we also do a total carbon and total analysis, total N. We could measure more. We have the capacity to measure more, like nutrients by UV meter. But I guess we would require some more stuff. Like that. We have like the UV meter and everything. Then we have like monoliths or patterns from various parts of the country, and we use it for etching and Hvanneyri, and it attracts many people because you can see the tephra layers that can determine the age of the soil, and you can see it almost from the bottom up to the organic matter top. It's very interesting. And I will end here by fieldwork in Keldudalur in the northern part. You can see beautiful tephra layers. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. This is also like an excellent resource to include in a living lab and so on. Just like just the pictures of the profiles you had also is very pedagogical. It's at the same time as you can use these resources to analyze for these kind of indicators of soil health and so on. For example, C/N ratio is one thing that is planned to be used, at least even if it's not maybe so simple as it is. So very cool. And I think I might as well dive into the soil health living labs directly, Kola, if you agree with me, and we take questions after that. So now we're gonna. First of all, I'm going to share my screen so we don't get any problems there. And take the chance to write the questions in the chat. We try to answer them as fast as or during the event. But this is like the main part of this call. Sorry for this. Wait, let's see. Kola, do you see my presenter view now, or do you see the whole?
It's perfect now.
It's perfect now. That's good, because I can read my small script also, so I know what's coming. Good. So now we're going to focus on these soil health living labs and lighthouses, and we can dive into directly to the definitions of them. So they're separate then, the soil health living labs from the lighthouses. And the main definition of the soil health living labs is that there are collaborative initiatives to co-create knowledge and innovation. So the definition goes as that it's user-centered, place-based, transdisciplinary research and innovation ecosystems, which involve both land managers, its scientists, and relevant partners in a systemic research and co-design. It's both for testing and monitoring and evaluating solutions in a real-life setting, which is really important, to improve their effectiveness for improving soil health and accelerate adoptions for sustainable soil management, for example, soil management. And the key words here is that it's user-centered, place-based, and it's this multi-stakeholder approach. So it's not only research, but you include all the types of people that are related to soil in a sense. And then it happens in a real-life setting, so in actual sites, and trying different solutions with help of these different stakeholders then. And this is to accelerate the adoption of the solutions that you find for these kind of soil health challenges that you have. And a living lab in itself will contain several sites. So it can be specific farms, it can be forest stands or experiments, for example. And it can also be in the urban setting, it can be city parks or so on, or a part of a city. And this works on a regional and a sub-regional level. So that is the living labs. And then if you go further on to the soil health lighthouses, it is individual sites instead that are exemplary in their performance related to soil health. So it's places for demonstration, different solutions, it's for training and communication, and they are exemplary in their performance related to soil health improvement. So these are used to showcase and demonstrate, train, and for networking and communication among future users and policymakers and broader society. So they're working as a beacon for the soil health practices that might be created in a soil health living lab, for example. And they help to adopt the sustainable practices and inspire land users to use these practical tools that are developed within the living lab. And the mission implementation plan defines a set of criteria to define the setup of a living lab, and it's can be classified according to 4 main areas for living labs. It is the aims, the activities, the participants, and the contexts. And if you look on the aims, it's about innovation and co-creation. It's also should contribute to a societal challenge, often related to soil in this case, of course, and then moving towards improving soil health and related ecosystem services. In this case, it's these 8 mission objectives, for example, which would be the center or the aim of these living labs. The activities are co-creation and co-development and experimentation. So doing research together with different practitioners, and then increasing this like networking and knowledge exchange between stakeholders. And also these lighthouses, but also the specific living labs is demonstration of these kind of solutions that they find as well. And particularly in lighthouses, there can be demonstration that is the most important part. And if we go to the participants, they should include the public-private people partnership, which is called the quadruple helix, which I will show. It's basically including all relevant stakeholders within the living lab. So it's used for real users or sole managers, but also in a broad spectrum of stakeholders and decision makers should be included in this living lab. And then the participants can also be included as a wider public or a public arena or relevant networks by using these living labs as demonstration objects and so on. And in what context it should be multidisciplinary, so not only natural sciences, but it can include also social sciences, or should include social sciences. It could be arts as well for the communication of these problems that you have. It should be both multiple disciplines in the methods and dimensions and so on. It should be place-based, as I said, in a real-life context, which is a very important part of it. And it should be based on robust scientific setup and for this ecosystem assessment. And then key for this is also the openness and communication and dissemination. And if you go to the lighthouses, the criteria is based on that their exemplary performance in terms of soil health related to ecosystem services. And why do we work within, why do we implement these living labs? Well, there's a lot of challenges when you have these different stakeholders and these soil health challenges, but a good thing with the living lab is that you can bring them together because they often talk different languages, so you don't talk the same language. The complexity of these soil challenges is that they cannot be solved by one single stakeholder. There's often a lack of trust between stakeholders. They have different approaches, different goals, and also practical solutions in one site might not be widespread or easy to spread, and this living lab will help to facilitate that. Also that practical solutions are maybe not always evaluated, and this can be done by bringing in the science part into the living lab. And then also you have a lot of motivated users that can use this that is not easily heard in other platforms. So the living lab can help all the different users to be heard in their input to the soil health conditions and so on. And what can be expected when you work within a living lab? Well, it can be inspiring for these different stakeholders. You can learn and think outside the box, both as a researcher or a land user. You can also understand each other better. You can accept the different perspectives and get inspiration from that also. And you aim for the same goal, and the buildup of these projects is built up together with these stakeholders from the beginning. An important part is also that it's carried out in a real-life setting, so it's very hands-on in that sense. It's also a co-creation with large sets of stakeholders, which I've said, and then also that already from the beginning it's involving the end user, so society as a whole, or for example the industry and so on. What to consider when setting up a lab? The first thing is like the places for co-creation and co-design. So where you should have these engagement and so on, and which persons will be involved in the living lab. So how do we get it to be interdisciplinary, and also how do we make it fit to this research and innovation approaches? And then an important part is also that when you apply for these living labs or create them is to have a long-term focus. So there should be a business model to ensure the sustainability of that living lab. And if we look broadly on the definition of a living lab again, we see that these, you see the blue circle is the living lab with its individual sites. And this living lab works on a regional or sub-regional scale. And the sites are, for example, particular farms or forests that you use in your experimentation, for example, or discussions or using, that's where you do your experiments, for example, related to a soil health issue. And then within this living lab, you have the multiple partners, which is stakeholders from all different areas, so researchers, land users, it can be people from NGOs and so on, depending on what soil health challenge you're working on and also what kind of land use you're in. You also see the light brown dots is sites that are actually lighthouses. So the lighthouses can be included within the living lab, but they can also be standing alone because they have this ability to demonstrate high performance and also be a place of discussion and so on. So that's one living lab. But when you apply for these calls, like one project that applies for this should include 4 to 5 living labs, which themselves have 10 to 20 experimental sites each. So here you see these different living labs, but most important or very important when you join a consortium like this to apply for these calls is that they should be connected in a with logic. It should be clear why these living labs has gone together. It can be that they're addressing the same land use or they're addressing one or more soil mission objectives together. But there are different ways, depending on the local context and so on, how the rationale behind them going together can be. So it can be that living labs, for example, focus on one objective together. Objective A, for example, could be reduce desertification, and that is relevant in different kinds of land use types depending on where you are. But it could also be that they're working on the same objective in the same land use, but within their local context. And the local context is then, for example, a Icelandic context in difference to a Swedish context, for example. And if you look at the last one, they have shown an alternative where they're looking at different objectives, but they have the common land use that unifies these living labs that have gone together. But that's an important part that you really should have a clear picture of why they have gone together, because this also not only helps for your living lab to get contribution from the others, but also makes it easier to work within such a large consortium, of course. And we in Nations have put front some suggestions and recommendations for these applications, and it's basically that you clearly articulate the driving forces why you made this consortium instead of having generic applications and a lack of specificity, like what your focus area is or how it relates to the soil mission challenge. So that's really a key thing. And then the second part is to choose appropriate partners, and also that not to have unclear like stakeholder roles. So really define what the main part of each stakeholder is within the living lab. And also to this, that it's important that you provide detail of how the activities will be coordinated within the living lab. So utilize, for example, the up-to-date research and provide details and information of how the living lab will apply co-creation and co-implementation and co-design, instead of having weak links to soil objectives and focuses and so on. And also important to do is to define the expected impact. So clearly describe what your anticipated improvements will be and have a baseline scenario that you can compare with afterwards, instead of then having missing this impact and outcomes. That's good to have for such an application, not only within your living lab, but also in relation to the other ones that you will have to include. Because within, sorry, now I can't change. There we go. So there's different focus areas, as I said. It's agricultural living labs, it's forestry living labs, urban living labs, and industrial living labs. And we in Nations have put front some fact sheets, for example. We have general ones on the soil mission and living lighthouses, but also within each of these different kinds of land use classes, where you can read about what is the potential partners that you should include, for example, and what would be like just examples of relevant soil health issues and so on that the living lab could focus within these different classes. And then we come to an essential part of a living lab, and the methodology with it is to include the different stakeholders. So you can divide, you should divide the different stakeholders in this quadruple helix that is called. It's the people's, private people-public-private partnership, where you have the public sector and government, you have the industry, you have citizens and civil society, and also academia included in this, in the living labs. And depending on what kind of land use it is, it might differ a bit with which type of NGOs and so on you include in your living lab. But that's important to have well defined when you're establishing your living lab. And here I have a few just, I mean, the living lab concept is not a new thing. These soil health living labs is just coming out. There's been one call, so it's approximately 25 living labs total developing now to be EU-funded soil living labs, but there are also alternatives out there already, like working within this kind of co-creation with different stakeholders and so on within these different land use classes. So for example, here is an example in Hungary where they use precision agriculture and so on, and talking together with or involving a lot of different stakeholders to improve their sustainability of the soil management within this region. And there's also, for example, a forestry-related living lab that works on fire, forest fires. It's both the restoration part of it, but also the fire hazard of having forest fires. So they take together all the stakeholders involved, and they try to increase the preparedness and prevention and extinction of fires, for example, at the same time as they look at it from ecological benefits of the wildfires and so on. And there's also other examples, like in urban living lab in Italy here, where they're using a living lab concept to integrate people both in the ecological parts and digital transformation of cities. And then you have another one focusing on industrial living labs out there also, and they're looking at the region's aging population and considerable loss to added value post-industrialization. So both the digital agriculture and agroecological transition is important in this living lab. And to get the solutions to the problems that they have, they need to get this stakeholder involvement is very important. There's a map in the Prep Soil project where you can look at this, where you can also put up if you have a potential living lab and map it up so you can find both, so people can find you, but you can also find relevant partners as well. So check out the Prep Soil website, which is quite similar to the Nations. You will recognize it, but it has another focus compared to Nations, which is only here to support you for this coming call. And I will end my presentation here, just reminding you that it's really the soil mission objectives that is the core of where you want to be when you're trying to develop this living lab and finding then a consortium. Because in this call, as I said, it should be 4 to 5 living labs, and they should be spread out in at least 3 different countries when you apply for these calls. So finding this red thread through the living labs and the relation to these mission objectives is very important. Good. With that, I think I will end here, Kola. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Do we have some questions?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything unanswered, so I will just share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to write any questions or raise your hand.
Yeah.
So share. I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Ranni services and just just a short overview to tell you there are more opportunities out there. So we have this funding scheme. It's 97 billion euros. I did like a quick calculation. If you take €1 for each second, this would take us 3,042 years to pass. So there are a lot of opportunities, and it's divided into 3 pillars, as you can see here. So you have excellent science, and we at Rannis, we have people covering each of these funding schemes. So if you're interested in anything, you can always just contact us, and we provide extensive assistance. And here we are working the missions that are related to the Pillar 2, which is the global challenges, European industrial competitiveness. And there we also have a responsible running person for these programs. I just highlighted a couple of names so you can get a feel that we are all here to help you. And you can always contact us at any point. I'm not going to go into specifics of each of the programs or what it entails to write a proposal, but I highlighted some keywords. And this is just to see if you have like an intuition, it might flare up, or you see some keyword there that you might be interested in knowing further about, and what sort of opportunities might be there for you and your institution or company. You can always just contact us. So I highlighted these words. I did it like both in English and Icelandic. So we have the soil, ocean, and waters. You have the climate, food safety, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and of course aquaculture is there as well. Then the environment. And you can just read those off. I'm not going to read them all, but maybe the most relevant here is the environmental observation, monitoring, conservation, restoration, and sustainable management. And some additional keywords are remote sensing, ecology of insect species, decline of insects, pollinators, key ecosystem functions, nitrogen monitoring, soil microbiome, sustainable land and forest management, and then we have the patlands and rewilding and carbon farming and best practices. So feel free to contact me if you see anything that you like. But there is also a cross-cutting emphasis on knowledge sharing. And this can be related to communication and dissemination, citizen engagement. Might also be something related to, as Jóhannes was talking about, the co-creation, co-design, engaging with the end user, the farmer, and yeah. So if you have something that you want to ask us about, you can always just contact us. But the keywords I was just mentioning, they also can be found in a live program that's more bottom-up program, so you can bring your own project. It's not as narrow maybe as some of the other programs. So if you have some projects related to nature and biodiversity or any of the other keywords, you can contact me and Björk. So if you did feel your intuition flare up, just contact any of the running staff, and we're always there to help you any step of the way. So don't hesitate to reach out. So just a short slide, like why would you participate? You're taking part in solving a big urgent challenge. We're all in the same boat when we can see that there's a dire need for some innovative solutions. There is generous funding, and it's most often it's 100% funded. You're making an impact on standards and research pathways. You'll gain access to outstanding research, publication, technology, infrastructure, and scientists. Your institution and you yourself, you might gain increased visibility in Europe and globally. You're building a research network and increasing your access to international markets, companies, and researchers. The competition can be tough, but the rewards are greater. So we at NATI00NS, we have regular webinars, we have trainings on specific matters. We also assist people who have received grants and how to make the reporting and just overall how to manage the grant. And we also help individuals if they want to see where their research fits in with the Horizon Work Program or the LIFE, which I just mentioned. And we offer tailor-made services for each customer. We are also reading over proposals. And like I said, we have the follow-up during the funding period. So what's happening by the end of the month, there's going to be a mission info day. It's on the 25th and 26th. It's only 2 hours set aside for the soil mission. They're going to open 10 deadlines at the end of the month. And it's 2.5 billion Icelandic krona that is in the pool. So I will send these presentations afterwards, and you can follow the mission info days. But I also recommend following the Icelandic Horizon Europe page. And then we have an NCP network. You will find a lot of material related to the cluster 6, which is what just I mentioned, all the keywords there above. And you can find all sorts of material that can be useful, events, documents. It can help you also make new connections at the brokerage event and so on. And then we have the funding and tender portals, and that is where you will see the 10 deadlines that will open at the end of May. And these 10 deadlines, they're all related to soil. So, thank you.
Fantastic, Gudrun. And I think I should also, when we're on this topic of let's see now. Do you see my screen now? Maybe you see the whole.
It's in presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the presentation view.
No,
Yeah.
you need to click it.
Yeah.
You can see your notes.
So, I guess it has stopped sharing. Let's see now. I will try again. Because we have quite a lot of material on nations and events and so on related to these particular calls. So first, a disclaimer here is that the information I provide now is within the nation consortium, but as Kola also agrees, like the most of the official source for reference is the Horizon Europe program for the EU soil mission calls, and the specific living lab calls are to be expected in the 18th of April. They haven't officially yet shown these new calls, but last year, for example, there was one that was on carbon farming, which was like focused on a particular soil objective, and then it was 3 calls opened up for that was more broadly related to living labs. Then that could be then fixed on some that you can decide yourself on what you should include in that application, and it's expected to be quite similar as last year. That one that was specific, it was 12 million euros for that living lab, where one call was expected to be funded, and then there was 3 other calls that was 12 million each then also that were on the broader sense. And this is what we expect to come in the 18th also. So one topic and then more broadly as well. And what important thing is that it should be in different member states with multiple living labs, and the research and innovation action says 100% funding by any actor, and it should be submitted, or the deadline is expected to be in September 2024. So it's important to start doing this living lab as soon as possible. So the first step then is to link your soil health challenge within Iceland or the particular field that you're working in, and no matter what kind of land use you're working in, if it's urban or if it's agricultural. And then the next step would be to find your living lab within Iceland and your setting, which stakeholders to involve, and so on, and initiate this developing of the living lab. And then the next step would be to find a consortium to join or initiate a consortium where you get this connection between them, and then to submit your application later then. But Nations is here to help you with that in a sense. So one important part that we have is these engagement events, where we have these in all these 43 countries in the national language. In Iceland, we have it in English. And then we have also a matchmaking platform, which basically works as LinkedIn in a sense, where you can create a profile and you can showcase the ideas you have and the living lab that you want to create and so on, and also find international partners via this way. We also have these fact sheets. We have a help desk where you can ask questions about living labs and the creation of them. We have webinars that is specifically related to the methodology within living labs. So a lot of material related to that. We have coaching, and in this case, it's Kolbrunn in Iceland, but there's also coaching in the other countries. And then we also have thematic events and webinars related both to specific land uses, but also for matchmaking in that sense. And one important, if you're really interested in being a part of this, which I think Iceland really should be, and I think from EU point of view, they really want you to apply also, is this matchmaking event in the Northern Europe, which we will have, which we will organize on the 8th of May, where you get a 2-minute presentation to showcase yourself and your ideas to people around Europe also. So it's more of a, not matchmaking within Iceland, but across Europe then also. So then you can make yourself visible and spread your ideas related to Soil Living Lab call. Exactly. And that's what I would leave you with when it comes to slides. Otherwise, I'm open for any questions or discussions if anyone wants to ask any questions. Or also if you have an idea, it's open to the floor is open for anyone to pitch in. I will also have a check in the chat. And I think Elin has sent you quite a lot of information to that. Okay. No hands raised.
No hands raised. I want to take the opportunity to thank you, Jóhannes, Anna Guðrún, Christian, and Maria for sharing your insight and expertise today. It was and also the show up to have 36 people present right now.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah.
That's great. You beat Norway, I think, even.
Woohoo.
Yeah, I would just have to beat them in creating living labs. I think that's the most important. Good. But I really think this matchmaking event has a good opportunity to get you into contact with other people going into the same minds, same direction like that.
Definitely. It's also a good idea if you are interested in this topic and going further with the EU proposal. There were many proposals that came in during the last session that might not have been funded. So there will probably be some projects applying again. And if you have a good collaborations outside of Iceland, you might want to reach out to your fellow researchers in the nearby countries.
And personally, I think Iceland has a good opportunity there because you're unique in that sense. I mean, you could have a regional living lab that will focus on similar land uses maybe as other countries, but it will be a unique setting. And not only what Anna Guðrún showed related to grazing and so on, but it's very relevant for showing the differences within Europe and so on, that the challenges differ a lot depending on where you are in Europe.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
I don't find the hand raise button, but yes. I was just exactly wondering about these living labs. Maybe due to like answering some questions, I maybe didn't get it, but I was just wondering how much, like when you go on a farm and like apply there some research, some experiment, how much should you like or need like the landowner, the stakeholder on the farm like involved? Because I would guess most often they are like busy with other things and just then like doing research and just more like keep that to us. But how should this involvement be like on the farms you're working in?
I think I'm a researcher too, and I think this is like when we have to shift our focus a bit. I mean, the land users should be there from the beginning and during the whole process. I mean, usually we do our research in one end and then we try to get that out to society. I think the living lab concept is going to be more of a platform to get the outreach directly from the beginning, and also seeing it as a platform to spread your research results also. So they should definitely have a big role in that. And when we're talking about like what will be like the smallest part of this living lab, it might be a land user, but the connection and the steering of the actual living lab might be a soil advisory board or something like that also. So it doesn't have to be a particular farmer that is involved, but they should be involved in the sense of being a part of this other networks that can be created, can be a part of the Living Lab. Yeah, we're going over time a bit. I just want to say thank you to all people who want to leave. Otherwise, it's open for us to continue this as long as you want with the questions and so on. Yes, Anna. Good.
Yes, I was just saying that we have now lined up, more than 40 farms, and I think that it's a good base. So, and I've just been scanning, and I did this last year, but I didn't have any time to do anything more with it then. But I think that, there's quite a lot of connection to both the nature and biodiversity, because many of we are also holding responsible. We're responsible for many waders, many bird species that are using the agricultural land, especially semi-natural grasslands. And we are, responsible for them because for some of them, or about 50% of the breeding stock is in Iceland. So that is one thing. And then also with, like I said earlier, regenerative agriculture, and that is like really revolting ideas in Europe, which are really into nature conservation. These are really, getting the animals out grazing freely, as we have been doing in Iceland for the last 1,000 years. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that we have to put into this through this part of, because there are not many people that have left, are in grazing like freely like we do. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. And we also have these forestry stands that are all over the place that are like besides land that's been grazed. So I think that we have a lot of opportunities in cooperation with the natural scientists and the biodiversity and the farming community. And I think that I've been scanning a bit, these living labs now that have been at it since last year, and they are some of them are on exactly regenerative agriculture and also on this biodiversity. So I think that we should be able to find something, and matchmaking would be good. But it's important to have the connection with the farming communities, and I have already quite sort of ideas which one would be possible in the farming community to work with. That's it.
So consortium is already forming.
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Good. Is there any questions coming in otherwise? No.
Well, maybe I could just say one thing, that if someone is, interested in joining on this exactly, that's why we're here, then just, contact me. That would be good.
And as I said in the beginning, I will share the whole participant list also, and the email addresses. So there you can see which persons came here that have shown interest, and then try to spread the word through that as well. And also don't be afraid to check into the other national engagement events that are across Europe also. These are some of the first, but then in the coming month there's going to be in all EU countries and so on. So that could be a good, like if you're in a particular land use and so on that you think would be relevant for another country, you can join those and get contacts through that way as well. And get things moving as fast as possible, because it's a big application, these things.
And also, just if you are very interested in this topic or any of the keywords that were listed there, we at RANIS, we are constantly working with experts from numerous fields, and just finding the correct call for legal entities in Iceland. We are forming policy papers or the work programs with these experts. So if you're interested in these topics, contact us, and we would be delighted that somebody's showing interest to our work. So
that's great. And also you as an NPC also is an important part in Iceland, of course. And you have contacts with all the other NCPs also, so you can help through that way as well. And don't hesitate to contact the nations either. And there's a lot of material on the website that can help you, that will include things that I did not have time to talk about today, for example, and the materials. So it's good. Good. Should we close it officially now, Kola, do you think?
Let's
Good.
close it. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much, everyone. And good luck. See
Thank
you in
you.
the Living Lab in the future.